I've had a ton of people give me advice over the years about what weapons to pick for what classes, for what situations, and for what game modes. And a lot of them have very well thought out reasonings and explanations behind them. But on the flip side, a lot of this advice has also just been most simply use stock. Let's face it, the stock weaponry in a lot of situations is very useful for most classes. However, there are more than a few exceptions in the lineup, because stock weapons have now been around for 10 years, and in that 10 years we have seen many weapons come along and take up our inventory slots. And stock weapons, I'd say, could officially be called retro, and it would seem from the outside that they're just not that useful anymore. I'm here to find out just how reliable they are today. In the game's current state, most of them not having changed too much over the years, save for a few tweaks to mechanics and damage here and there. I'll also be discussing the options you have if they're underwhelming or just not that great. And what better way to start off this brand new series than to talk about the class I have the most experience with, the Engineer. In case you couldn't tell from the last video, he's my main. And with that said, let's get retro. For a bit of context, the Engineer is arguably one of the few classes that has had the most changes to his stock mechanics and weapons. In his initial form, there were more than a few things he could not do. For about a year after the game launched, he couldn't upgrade his teleporters or dispensers. This ability was added in December of 2008 and provided a brand new incentive for engineers to build teleporters and dispensers. Secondly, he could not initially haul his buildings from point A to B, B to C, C to D, so on and so on. This ability was added in the Engineer update of July 2010, allowing for better usefulness of Engineer on things like payload attack and control point attack, where you're constantly moving forward. That very same update also added weapons that helped with this issue, but this episode isn't about those, and I've already covered one of those before, so go watch it. Now. I'll wait. Of course, all of this is commonplace now, and many strategies popped up in the following years relating to these abilities, and in all, if you're like me and restricting yourself to playing stock, in quotes, I would not advise ignoring all of these mechanics because, well, they were added for a reason. The Engineer in his original form was very underwhelming. Then again, a lot of the classes were, and that's not a bad thing. When a new product comes out and the general public finds blatant flaws that maybe the development team didn't think of or didn't see, they fix it. It happens. Pyro didn't have the air blast, Spy's knife drew way too slowly, and Medic was just pitiful in combat. The Engineer having to destroy his crap if he wanted to do something so simple as moving 5 feet forward was a horrible way to design the class, is what I would say if this game came out in the current state it's in now. At the time, there really wasn't a ton of creative ways to destroy sentries. Maps were much more closed in and smaller, and the classes were perfectly balanced with one another. Now I would say that they are a requirement, because playing Engineer was a fucking slog back then, boring and turtling galore, and if you're using the stock weapons, it still feels that way some of the time. The wrench is pretty good no matter what the situation. It's sort of like the Medic's Medigun, the Spy's knife, or the Heavy's minigun. It is his primarily used tool, and it has an interchangeable option for almost every situation. Aggressive attack, defense, spy countering, you name it. One or more of them can handle it, and the wrench is one tool that you can rely on in most situations, if absolutely need be. Sure, in some situations there are optimal choices, like the gunslinger being the most notable alternative, and really the choice of wrench you use is up to your playstyle. I would consider the wrench the one item in your stock inventory that is quote-unquote the best choice if you're looking for a reliable, consistent partner in crime. The shotgun is okay. Really, the shotgun shines in a lot of situations, and it's reliable. So much so, it's the secondary for a lot of classes that rarely ever use it as a secondary anymore in terms of veterans. Heavies use sandwiches, pyros use flare guns, and soldiers are very up in the air about it, but all of these classes use it as a secondary. The shotgun is the Engineer's official primary. That said, the shotgun is strictly situational, unlike the wrench. It's a good introductory primary for new players so that they learn engineers aren't really meant to do combat like most other classes, given the shotgun does less than optimal damage at farther ranges, and the engineer has less than optimal health in close fights. On defense, there are just better options for, defending. Of course, the main one I'm talking about is the Rescue Ranger with its ranged healing. It can be a pretty good primary to kill and defend with, and I personally prefer using it over the shotgun most of the time simply because of its projectile-based nature. On offense, you have a few more options. Sure, the shotgun does most of its shining work on offense, but you also have weapons like the Frontier Justice and the Widowmaker, depending on what type of sentry you're using. The Frontier Justice shines mostly with mini-sentries given its aggressive promoting nature, and the Widowmaker shines pretty much with either sentry on offense. In all, the shotgun is a fine weapon to start out with, but if you have an alternative, go for that. You won't be missing much. Where the wrench can be universal and the shotgun is strictly situational, the pistol and its variants are very meh. The pistol works, it does its job, it's a fine weapon for an engineer. The slot is sort of purely what you want to do with it. Some might argue the Wrangler is the definitive choice, some might say the Short Circuit is the best, others will say definitely use the pistol. As for me, I'd say go with whatever you feel like. Unlike the shotgun, I never saw an instance where it just couldn't do anything. Unlike the wrench, I never saw any reasoning why you could theoretically use it all the time. The pistol works, the Wrangler works, the Short Circuit works. They all work if you want to use them, but none of them are a must-have at all times weapon. The pistol is passable. In all, the engineer's stock weapons work. It's not impossibly difficult to play with them, even if everyone around you is a pro, or been playing since launch. They're a passable arsenal if you have nothing else on hand for some odd reason. However, together they don't always work that well, given in nearly every circumstance there's an established meta loadout of some sort. Say what you will about metas, but they are there and accepted for a reason. That's all I have for today's program, and I'll see you next time. It's safe to change the channel now.